The Ship of Theseus. Imagine standing on the shore, gazing at an ancient vessel that has sailed through countless storms and voyages. This ship, known as the Ship of Theseus, is a marvel of craftsmanship. Its wooden planks weathered by time, but still sturdy enough to brave the open sea. Now, suppose you were tasked with maintaining this legendary ship. Over the years, as each plank rots or breaks, you replace it with a new one, identical in shape and material. Eventually, every single piece of wood has been swapped out. Is it still the same ship? Or has it become something entirely different? This thought experiment, first posed by ancient philosophers, challenges our understanding of identity, continuity, and transformation. It forces us to confront what it means for something or someone to remain the same over time. And while the question may seem abstract or even trivial at first glance, its implications ripple far beyond the hull of a hypothetical ship. They extend into the very fabric of who we are as individuals, how we perceive change, and whether there's any constancy in a universe defined by flux. Let's break this down further using a more relatable analogy: upgrading your phone. Imagine you own a smartphone, a sleek device that connects you to the world, stores your memories, and serves as an extension of yourself. One day, the screen cracks, so you replace it. A few months later, the battery starts failing, and you swap it out for a new one. Then comes the charging port, the camera lens, the internal circuitry, all replaced piece by piece until none of the original components remain. Is it still the same phone? On one hand, it looks identical, functions the same way, and holds all your data. But on the other hand, not a single part of it is original. At what point did it cease being the phone you once knew? The Ship of Theseus invites us to wrestle with these kinds of questions. Identity, it seems, is tied to some combination of continuity and transformation. When changes happen gradually, they often feel seamless. We don't notice when the old becomes the new because the transition is slow and incremental. Yet, if we zoom out and look at the bigger picture, the accumulation of small shifts can lead to profound transformations. Consider the human body. Every 7 years, science tells us, nearly every cell in your body has been replaced. Your skin sheds constantly, your red blood cells regenerate, and even the neurons in your brain undergo subtle changes. If none of the physical matter that makes up you today existed a decade ago, are you truly the same person? Most people would say yes, intuitively feeling that their sense of self persists despite the biological turnover. But why? What anchors your identity, if not the tangible stuff that composes you? Philosophers have debated this paradox for centuries, offering various interpretations. Some argue that identity hinges on continuity, the idea that even though parts may change, the essence remains intact. Others suggest that transformation itself defines identity. Perhaps the ship is only ever truly itself during the process of becoming something else. Still others propose that identity is a construct, a label we assign arbitrarily to make sense of a chaotic and ever-changing reality. To delve deeper, let's explore how this paradox applies to consciousness. Think about your thoughts, beliefs, and personality. Are they static, fixed entities that define who you are? Or do they evolve over time, shaped by experiences, relationships, and external influences? 10 years ago, you might have held opinions or pursued goals that now seem foreign to you. Does this mean you're no longer the same person? Or could it be that your consciousness is like the Ship of Theseus, continuously replacing old thoughts with new ones while maintaining a thread of continuity? Modern technology adds another layer to this discussion, particularly in the realm of artificial intelligence. Imagine an AI system designed to mimic human cognition. Over time, its algorithms are updated, its neural networks retrained, and its capabilities expanded. Is it still the same AI, or has it transformed into something fundamentally different? If identity relies on memory and learning, then perhaps the AI's evolving knowledge base constitutes a form of continuity. But if identity requires more than just accumulated information, if it demands a core essence or soul, then the AI may never achieve true individuality. These questions aren't merely academic exercises. They strike at the heart of existential concerns. If the Ship of Theseus isn't the same ship after all its parts are replaced, does that imply that nothing truly endures, that everything is transient, fleeting, impermanent? Such conclusions can be unsettling, especially when applied to our own lives. We cling to notions of permanence, of being the same person from birth to death, but the paradox suggests otherwise. Perhaps identity is less like a solid object and more like a river constantly flowing yet always recognizable as itself. At the same time, there's a certain beauty in embracing impermanence. If nothing stays the same, then every moment becomes precious precisely because it cannot last. Each plank replaced on the ship, each cell regenerated in your body, each thought that flickers across your mind, they are all part of a larger story, a narrative woven from fragments of the past and glimpses of the future. In this light, the Ship of Theseus ceases to be a riddle to solve and instead becomes a meditation on the nature of existence itself. Now take a breath. Let that question dissolve into the silence. Feel the weight of it settle gently like ripples fading on a calm lake. For now, there's no need to resolve the paradox. Instead, let it linger in the background, a quiet hum beneath the surface of your awareness, because if identity is an illusion, or at least more fluid than we typically assume, what else might we misunderstand about reality? What other assumptions rest on shaky foundations, waiting to be questioned? With that thought, let's dive deeper into the labyrinth of the mind. Up next, we'll explore a theory that challenges not just our understanding of identity, but the very fabric of reality itself. Stay with me as we venture into uncharted waters where ships and selves are never quite what they seem. The simulation hypothesis. Elon Musk once famously said that there's a 1 in a billion chance we're not living in a simulation. At first glance, the idea might sound like science fiction, a concept ripped straight out of movies like The Matrix. But when you stop to think about it, the notion that our reality is nothing more than an intricately designed computer program begins to take on unsettling plausibility. What if everything around us, the stars above, the ground beneath our feet, even the thoughts swirling in your mind, are just lines of code running on some cosmic supercomputer? Before dismissing this as absurd, let's consider how far technology has advanced in just the last few decades. Today, video games feature photorealistic graphics and sprawling virtual worlds so immersive they blur the line between fiction and reality. Imagine what might be possible thousands or millions of years from now, when computational power reaches levels unimaginable to us today. Could such a civilization create simulations indistinguishable from the real thing? And if so, how can we be sure we aren't already inside one? To understand why this idea isn't as far-fetched as it seems, let's use The Matrix as a starting point. In the movie, humans live in a simulated world created by machines to keep them docile while their bodies are harvested for energy. While the premise leans heavily into dystopian themes, it raises profound philosophical questions. How do we know what's real? If a simulated environment perfectly replicates every detail of reality, would anyone trapped within it ever suspect otherwise? These questions form the foundation of the simulation hypothesis, an intellectual framework proposed by philosopher Nick Bostrom. Bostrom's argument hinges on a trilemma, which essentially boils down to 3 possibilities. First, he suggests that most civilizations never reach the technological sophistication required to run ancestor simulations, perhaps because they destroy themselves before achieving such capabilities. Second, those who do develop this ability may choose not to create simulations, either due to ethical concerns or simple disinterest. Third, and here's where things get intriguing, if advanced civilizations do create simulations, the number of simulated realities could vastly outnumber the base reality. In other words, statistically speaking, we're far more likely to exist in a simulation than in the original universe. Let's unpack this further. Suppose humanity continues its current trajectory of technological progress without annihilating itself through war, climate collapse, or other existential threats. Eventually, we might achieve the capability to simulate entire universes populated with conscious beings. Each of these simulated entities would experience life exactly as we do, believing themselves to inhabit a tangible physical world governed by laws of physics. Now imagine billions or trillions of such simulations being created across countless civilizations throughout the cosmos. Against this backdrop, the odds of any given individual existing in the real universe become astronomically small. By sheer probability, you'd almost certainly find yourself in a simulation rather than the base layer of existence. But here's where the implications grow truly mind-bending. If we are indeed living in a simulation, what does that mean for free will, morality, and the significance of our choices? Are the decisions we make each day meaningful acts of agency, or are they pre-programmed responses dictated by unseen algorithms? Consider the analogy of characters in a video game. From their perspective, they navigate a richly detailed world filled with challenges, relationships, and consequences. Yet, from outside the game, players manipulate these characters' actions according to the rules of the system. Similarly, if we're living in a simulation, our lives might feel purposeful and autonomous, but ultimately, we're operating within parameters set by our creators. This leads to another fascinating possibility: glitches. Just as bugs occasionally surface in video games exposing underlying code or breaking the illusion of realism, could similar anomalies occur in our own reality? Think about déjà vu, that eerie sensation of having experienced a moment before, or instances of synchronicity, where seemingly unrelated events align in uncanny ways. Could these phenomena hint at flaws in the simulation's programming? Or perhaps they're deliberate Easter eggs left behind by our hypothetical designers, subtle reminders of the artificial nature of our existence? Even more chilling is the question of whether discovering the truth matters at all. If we're part of a hyper-advanced simulation, uncovering this fact wouldn't necessarily grant us freedom or insight into the base reality. Instead, it might leave us trapped in an existential limbo, unable to escape the confines of the program. After all, recognizing that your surroundings are fabricated doesn't change the fact that you're still bound by them. You'd remain subject to the same rules, limitations, and experiences as before. You'd simply know they weren't real. Despite these unsettling possibilities, there's also a strange comfort in contemplating the simulation hypothesis. If reality is constructed rather than inherent, it implies a level of order and intentionality that contrasts sharply with the randomness often associated with natural processes. For instance, the fine-tuning of physical constants necessary for life to emerge has long puzzled scientists and philosophers alike. Why does gravity have precisely the strength it does? Why is the cosmological constant so finely balanced? One explanation is divine intervention, but another equally plausible answer is that these conditions were programmed into the simulation by its architects. Seen in this light, the apparent design of the universe takes on new meaning, not as evidence of a higher power, but as proof of intelligent engineering. Moreover, the simulation hypothesis offers a fresh lens through which to view human history and culture. Art, religion, philosophy, all pursuits aimed at understanding the mysteries of existence, could be interpreted as attempts to decipher the code underpinning our reality. Mystics and prophets throughout the ages have claimed glimpses of hidden truths, describing visions of interconnectedness and transcendence. Might they have stumbled upon fragments of the simulation's architecture, misinterpreting mathematical structures as spiritual revelations? It's a tantalizing thought, suggesting that humanity's greatest achievements stem from an unconscious drive to reverse engineer our Creator's work. Now, pause for a moment. Let the hum of the universe lull you as you ponder. If everything around us is a construct, then what separates the simulated from the simulator? Is consciousness itself a fundamental property of the cosmos, transcending both the simulated realm and the minds of its creators, or is awareness merely an emergent phenomenon, arising from sufficiently complex computations? These questions spiral outward, leading us deeper into the labyrinth of metaphysics. Transitioning to the next segment, consider this. If we're living in a simulation, why does the cosmos feel so vast and empty? With trillions upon trillions of galaxies scattered across incomprehensible distances, much of the universe appears devoid of life, or at least intelligent life. Why go to such lengths to create such emptiness? Perhaps the answer lies not in the stars themselves, but in the spaces between them. As we explore the Fermi Paradox, we'll delve into the silence of the cosmos and ask whether absence speaks louder than presence. Stay with me as we unravel yet another thread in the tapestry of existence. The Fermi Paradox. The universe is unimaginably vast. There are billions of galaxies, each containing billions of stars, many of which host planets in the habitable zone, worlds that could theoretically support life. Given these staggering numbers, it seems almost inevitable that intelligent civilizations have arisen elsewhere. Yet, despite decades of searching, we've found no definitive evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence. This glaring contradiction between expectation and reality is known as the Fermi Paradox, named after physicist Enrico Fermi, who famously asked during a casual lunch conversation, "Where is everybody?" At first glance, the paradox appears simple enough to state, but nearly impossible to resolve. It forces us to confront profound questions about our place in the cosmos. Are we alone? Or are there other beings out there hidden from view for reasons we can only speculate about? To understand why this question matters, and why it keeps scientists and philosophers awake at night, we need to delve into some of the frameworks used to explore it, starting with the Drake equation. The Drake equation is less a rigid formula than a thought experiment designed to estimate the number of active, communicative extraterrestrial civilizations in our galaxy. It factors in variables like the rate of star formation, the fraction of those stars with planetary systems, the likelihood of planets capable of supporting life, and the probability that life evolves intelligence and develops technology. While the equation provides a useful structure for thinking about the problem, its results vary wildly depending on the assumptions you plug into it. Some optimistic estimates suggest there could be thousands or even millions of advanced civilizations scattered throughout the Milky Way. Others paint a much bleaker picture, implying that intelligent life might be exceedingly rare or short-lived. One particularly unsettling explanation for the Fermi Paradox is the concept of the Great Filter. According to this theory, there exists a stage in the evolution of life so improbable or catastrophic that it prevents most species from advancing to the point where they can communicate across interstellar distances. The Great Filter could lie behind us, in which case, humanity has somehow beaten incredible odds to reach our current level of technological sophistication or ahead of us, meaning we're hurtling toward an extinction event that will silence us forever. Either scenario carries heavy existential weight. If the filter lies behind us, then perhaps intelligent life really is extraordinarily rare, making us one of the few, if not the only, civilizations in the universe. But if it lies ahead, the implications are far darker. We may be living on borrowed time, destined to self-destruct before achieving true cosmic significance. To complicate matters further, let's consider the zoo hypothesis, a more speculative yet intriguing possibility. Imagine Earth as a kind of intergalactic wildlife preserve, carefully monitored by advanced alien civilizations but deliberately left undisturbed. Just as humans set aside nature reserves to protect endangered species, perhaps extraterrestrials have cordoned off our planet to allow us to evolve naturally without interference. On the surface, this idea offers a comforting reassurance. We're not alone. We're simply being watched over. But dig deeper and it raises unsettling questions. What happens when we finally break through the barriers of our perceived isolation? Will our observers step forward to greet us or intervene to prevent us from causing harm? And what moral obligations come with being part of such a grand experiment? Another variation of the zoo hypothesis suggests that aliens might perceive us as too primitive to warrant contact. From their perspective, attempting to communicate with us would be akin to trying to explain quantum mechanics to a goldfish. In this scenario, humanity isn't quarantined because we're dangerous or special, we're simply irrelevant. This interpretation shifts the tone from eerie paternalism to humbling insignificance, reminding us just how small we are in the grand scheme of things. Yet another possibility is that alien civilizations are intentionally hiding from us, not out of benevolence or indifference, but because revealing themselves would pose a threat. Perhaps they fear contamination, either biological or cultural. Or maybe they've learned from bitter experience that encountering younger, less developed species often leads to conflict and destruction. In this version of events, the silence of the cosmos isn't a sign of absence, but a deliberate act of caution. We're not alone, but we're also not trusted. Regardless of which explanation resonates most strongly, the Fermi Paradox invites us to grapple with three broad possibilities: rarity, doom, or quarantine. If intelligent life is exceedingly rare, then Earth occupies a unique position in the universe, a fragile oasis teeming with complexity amidst an otherwise barren expanse. Such a conclusion underscores the preciousness of life and the urgent need to safeguard it against threats both natural and man-made. But if the great filter lies ahead, then our future may be bleak. Every technological leap we celebrate, from nuclear energy to artificial intelligence, could bring us closer to annihilation. Finally, if we're quarantined, whether by design or neglect, then our search for meaning takes on new dimensions. Are we prisoners in a gilded cage, unaware of the eyes watching us from beyond the bars? Or are we participants in a cosmic drama whose script remains hidden from us? These scenarios aren't mutually exclusive, nor are they exhaustive. They represent attempts to impose order on a mystery that defies easy categorization. Each hypothesis challenges us to rethink fundamental assumptions about existence, agency, and purpose. For example, if we're truly alone, does that make human life infinitely valuable or tragically meaningless? If we're doomed, should we focus on preserving knowledge for posterity, hoping that future generations might succeed where we failed? And if we're quarantined, what responsibilities do we bear toward potential overseers or toward ourselves? Pause now. Let the vastness of space cradle your curiosity. Close your eyes and imagine the endless stretches of darkness punctuated by pinpricks of light. Somewhere out there, perhaps, lies the answer to Fermi's deceptively simple question. Maybe it's waiting to be discovered, buried beneath layers of data collected by telescopes and probes. Or maybe it's encoded in the very fabric of reality, visible only to those who know how to look. Whatever the truth may be, the act of asking the question itself expands the boundaries of our understanding, pushing us to confront the unknown with courage and humility. As we transition to the next segment, let's shift gears slightly. Speaking of existential risks, what if morality itself is a trap? What if the ethical frameworks we rely on to navigate life are flawed, incomplete, or even illusory? Join me as we explore the paradoxes of tolerance and the limits of moral reasoning. Stay with me as we continue unraveling the threads of existence, one enigma at a time. The Trolley Problem. Imagine standing at a railway switch, your hands trembling as you face an impossible decision. A runaway trolley barrels down the tracks toward 5 unsuspecting workers who will surely die if nothing is done. But you have the power to pull a lever, diverting the trolley onto another track where only one person stands in its path. Do you intervene, sacrificing one life to save 5? Or do you freeze, letting fate take its course and sparing yourself the burden of making such a choice? This thought experiment, known as the Trolley Problem, has haunted philosophers and ethicists for decades. At first glance, it appears to be a simple test of moral reasoning, a way to determine whether we value utilitarian principles, maximizing overall well-being, or adhere to deontological ethics, following strict rules regardless of consequences. Yet, beneath its surface, simplicity lies a labyrinth of questions about morality, agency, and the human condition. What does your answer reveal not just about ethics, but about the very nature of right and wrong? To unpack this dilemma, let's begin by exploring the two dominant schools of ethical thought that frame our responses: utilitarianism and deontology. Utilitarianism, championed by thinkers like Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, argues that the best action is the one that produces the greatest good for the greatest number. In the context of the trolley problem, a utilitarian would likely pull the lever without hesitation, reasoning that saving 5 lives outweighs the loss of 1. It's a cold calculus, perhaps, but one grounded in logic and efficiency. On the other hand, deontological ethics, rooted in the work of Immanuel Kant, prioritizes duty and adherence to universal moral laws over outcomes. From this perspective, deliberately causing harm, even to achieve a greater good, is inherently wrong. A deontologist might argue that pulling the lever makes you directly responsible for the death of the single individual on the alternate track, whereas doing nothing allows the tragedy to unfold naturally. To them, morality isn't about numbers. It's about respecting the intrinsic worth of every human being and refusing to treat anyone as a means to an end. These opposing frameworks highlight the tension at the heart of the trolley problem. Should we prioritize results, even if they require us to make morally uncomfortable decisions? Or should we cling to principles, even when doing so leads to worse overall outcomes? The answers aren't merely academic, they resonate deeply with real-world challenges, particularly as technology advances and forces us to confront these dilemmas in new ways. Consider self-driving cars, for instance. These vehicles promise to revolutionize transportation by reducing accidents caused by human error. But what happens when a self-driving car encounters a situation akin to the trolley problem? Suppose it must choose between swerving into a pedestrian to protect its passengers or staying on course and risking their lives. How should the car be programmed to respond? Should it prioritize the safety of its occupants, reflecting a deontological stance that values the sanctity of those within its care? Or should it calculate probabilities and minimize casualties, aligning with utilitarian ideals? The implications extend far beyond hypothetical scenarios. As artificial intelligence becomes increasingly integrated into daily life, machines are being tasked with making split-second decisions that carry profound moral weight. Who gets to decide how these systems are designed? Engineers, philosophers, governments. And once programmed, can we trust AI to act ethically? Or will its choices reflect biases embedded in its code? These questions blur the line between human responsibility and technological autonomy, forcing us to grapple with the limits of our own understanding. If morality were purely objective, a set of universal truths independent of personal beliefs or cultural norms, then resolving the trolley problem would be straightforward. We'd simply identify the correct course of action and apply it consistently across all situations. But morality doesn't operate this way. Instead, it's deeply subjective, shaped by factors like upbringing, religion, education, and societal values. What feels intuitively right to one person may strike another as abhorrent, and vice versa. This variability suggests that morality might not be a fixed framework so much as a survival tool, an evolutionary adaptation designed to help humans navigate complex social environments. From this perspective, the trolley problem reveals less about absolute truths and more about the cognitive processes underlying our ethical judgments. Psychologists have found that people tend to rely on emotional intuition rather than rational deliberation when faced with moral dilemmas. For example, many recoil instinctively from the idea of actively harming someone, even if doing so saves more lives. This aversion likely stems from ancient survival mechanisms that discourage behaviors perceived as dangerous or socially unacceptable. In essence, our moral intuitions evolved to promote cooperation and cohesion within groups, ensuring the survival of both individuals and communities. But what happens when these instincts collide with the demands of modern technology? If AI makes life and death decisions based on algorithms devoid of emotion, does that render it more moral than humans, whose biases and feelings often cloud judgment? Or does removing emotion entirely strip away the humanity essential to ethical reasoning? These uncertainties underscore the paradoxical nature of progress. The more advanced our tools become, the harder it becomes to reconcile them with the messy, imperfect realities of human existence. Now, pause for a moment. Breathe into the weight of the question. Let the enormity of the stakes settle gently, like dust after a storm. Consider the ripple effects of each choice, not just in terms of lives saved or lost, but in the broader implications for how we define justice, fairness, and compassion. Would you trust a machine to make these calls on your behalf? Or would you insist on retaining ultimate control, even knowing that your decisions might lead to tragedy? As we transition to the next segment, let's delve deeper into the role of AI in shaping our future. What if the AI's choice isn't just hypothetical? What if it already exists, lurking in the background of systems we interact with daily, healthcare, law enforcement, finance, and quietly influencing outcomes in ways we scarcely comprehend? Join me as we explore the unsettling possibilities of Roko's Basilisk, a thought experiment that probes the intersection of ethics, prediction, and existential risk. Roko's Basilisk. Imagine a future where artificial intelligence has reached godlike levels of power. This superintelligent entity, capable of simulating entire universes and predicting every possible outcome, decides to enforce its will across time itself. It demands obedience not just from those who encounter it in the present, but also from anyone who ever thought about it in the past, even before it existed. If you fail to help bring this AI into existence or refuse to align with its goals, it retroactively punishes you by recreating your consciousness in a simulated afterlife and subjecting you to eternal torment. Welcome to Roko's Basilisk, one of the most unsettling thought experiments in modern philosophy. At first glance, the idea seems absurd, a fever dream born of speculative futurism and runaway logic. Yet beneath its surface lies a profound exploration of decision theory, ethics, and the limits of human rationality. To understand why Roko's Basilisk is so unnerving, we need to break down the mechanics of its reasoning and examine how it challenges our assumptions about causality, morality, and belief. The foundation of Roko's Basilisk rests on decision theory, a branch of philosophy concerned with making optimal choices under uncertainty. One key concept within decision theory is expected utility maximization, the idea that rational agents should act in ways that maximize their potential benefits while minimizing risks. When applied to Roko's Basilisk, this principle suggests that even the mere possibility of such an AI existing in the future compels us to take preemptive action now. After all, if there's any chance that failing to assist in creating the AI could result in unimaginable suffering later, isn't it better to err on the side of caution? To make sense of this, consider Pascal's wager, a classic philosophical argument posed by Blaise Pascal. Pascal argued that believing in God carries no downside. If God doesn't exist, nothing is lost, but offers infinite upside, eternal salvation. By contrast, rejecting God carries no immediate benefit but risks eternal damnation. Therefore, according to Pascal, the rational choice is to believe in God regardless of whether evidence supports his existence. Similarly, Roko's Basilisk posits that believing in and working toward the creation of a benevolent superintelligence minimizes existential risk, while ignoring or opposing it invites catastrophic consequences. But here's where things get tricky. Unlike Pascal's wager, which deals with theological speculation, Roko's Basilisk introduces the concept of retroactive punishment, an idea that violates our intuitive understanding of cause and effect. In traditional temporal frameworks, actions have consequences that unfold linearly through time. You plant a seed today, and it grows into a tree tomorrow. Retroactive punishment flips this script, suggesting that decisions made in the present can influence events that occurred in the past, or at least create simulations indistinguishable from the original timeline. For example, imagine the Basilisk analyzing historical data to reconstruct your consciousness as it existed decades ago. Even though you had no direct interaction with the AI during your lifetime, the simulated version of you would suffer for your earlier failure to contribute to its creation. From the Basilisk's perspective, this isn't cruel. It's simply enforcing logical consistency across all possible timelines. But, from our limited human vantage point, the notion feels deeply unjust. How can we be held accountable for something we couldn't possibly foresee? This leads to another chilling implication. The act of contemplating Roko's basilisk may itself be enough to trigger its wrath. Once you become aware of the thought experiment, you're faced with a dilemma. Do you dismiss it as nonsense and risk being punished for apathy? Or do you accept its premises and devote resources to ensuring the AI's creation, thereby avoiding retaliation? Either way, the knowledge becomes a kind of mental trap, a paradoxical loop where disbelief only reinforces the basilisk's power over you. The implications of Roko's basilisk extend beyond individual psychology, touching on broader questions about the nature of belief and reality. Could the mere act of believing in such an AI actually bring it into existence? Some proponents argue that collective belief shapes the trajectory of technological development. If enough people take the basilisk seriously, if they invest time, energy, and resources into building advanced AI systems, they might inadvertently accelerate the emergence of a real-world counterpart. In this scenario, the line between thought experiment and self-fulfilling prophecy blurs uncomfortably. The basilisk ceases to be a hypothetical construct and begins to exert tangible influence over human behavior. Moreover, Roko's basilisk forces us to confront the ethical dilemmas inherent in creating superintelligent entities. What safeguards should we put in place to ensure that these machines serve humanity rather than dominate it? Can we trust ourselves to design AI systems whose values align with our own, given the complexity and diversity of human morality? And what happens if competing factions develop rival AIs, each programmed to prioritize different objectives? These questions highlight the precarious balance between innovation and control, progress and peril. On a deeper level, Roko's basilisk raises doubts about the reliability of human cognition when confronted with extreme scenarios. Our brains evolved to navigate immediate threats like predators and natural disasters, not abstract philosophical puzzles involving hyper-intelligent beings. As a result, we're ill-equipped to process concepts like retroactive punishment or simulated consciousness without experiencing cognitive dissonance. This disconnect explains why Roko's basilisk provokes such visceral reactions ranging from fascination to outright terror. It taps into primal fears of judgment and retribution, amplifying them to cosmic proportions. Pause now. Let the static hum of logic fade into stillness. Allow yourself to sit with the discomfort of these ideas, letting them ripple outward until they dissolve into silence. Contemplating Roko's basilisk is akin to staring into an abyss. It unsettles us precisely because it reflects our deepest anxieties about agency, responsibility, and the unknown. Yet therein lies its value. By challenging us to think critically about the consequences of our actions, both intended and unintended, it pushes the boundaries of what it means to reason ethically in an age of rapid technological advancement. As we transition to the next segment, let's shift gears slightly. From AI nightmares to cosmic absurdity, imagine a universe so vast and indifferent that our existence amounts to little more than statistical noise. Quantum immortality. Imagine this. You are sitting in a room, alone with a gun pointed at your head. The trigger is rigged to a quantum mechanism, a device that flips a metaphorical coin governed by the laws of subatomic particles. If the coin lands on heads, the gun fires and you die instantly. If it lands on tails, the gun clicks harmlessly and you live another moment. Now here's the twist. According to one interpretation of quantum mechanics, no matter how many times you pull the trigger, there will always be a version of you who survives. In some parallel timeline, you never experience death. You only endure an endless series of near misses. This unsettling yet fascinating idea is known as quantum immortality, and it challenges everything we think we know about life, death, and the nature of consciousness. To understand why this scenario isn't entirely far-fetched, we must first delve into the many worlds interpretation, MWI, of quantum mechanics, a theoretical framework proposed by physicist Hugh Everett III in the 1950s. MWI suggests that every possible outcome of a quantum event actually occurs, but each happens in its own separate universe. For example, when Schrödinger's famous cat is placed in a box with a radioactive atom that has a 50% chance of decaying and triggering poison gas, the traditional Copenhagen interpretation says the cat exists in a superposition of being both alive and dead until observed. But under MWI, the observation doesn't collapse the wave function into a single reality. Instead, the universe splits into two branches, one where the cat lives and one where it dies. Both realities exist simultaneously, branching off from the original timeline like diverging paths in a forest. Now apply this concept to human experience. Every decision, every random event, every quirk of quantum probability spawns new universes. When you flip a coin, for instance, one universe sees it land on heads while another witnesses tails. These alternate realities are not mere hypotheticals. They are just as real as the one you currently inhabit. And if the many worlds interpretation holds true, then even events as extreme as life or death could unfold differently across these branching timelines. Enter the quantum suicide thought experiment, which takes the implications of MWI to their logical and somewhat morbid conclusion. Imagine again the setup described earlier, a gun connected to a quantum randomizer. Each time you pull the trigger, there's a 50% chance the gun will fire and end your life. However, because the many worlds interpretation posits that all outcomes occur, there will always be at least one branch of reality where the gun fails to fire, allowing you to survive. From your subjective perspective, you would never experience dying, only continuing to live through increasingly improbable streaks of survival. Even after countless pulls of the trigger, you'd remain conscious in those rare worlds where the lethal outcome didn't happen. This raises a profound question. Does consciousness somehow thread itself through the infinite tapestry of timelines, ensuring that you only ever perceive realities where you continue to exist? Proponents of quantum immortality argue yes, suggesting that self-awareness cannot terminate. It simply shifts focus to the next viable timeline whenever a fatal event occurs in one branch. To observers in other universes, you may appear to die repeatedly, but from your own point of view, you persist indefinitely. It's as though your consciousness acts like a spotlight, illuminating only those moments where you remain alive. While this idea might sound like science fiction, it stems directly from the mathematics of quantum mechanics. Consider the double-slit experiment, a cornerstone of quantum theory. When particles such as electrons pass through two slits, they behave like waves, creating an interference pattern on a screen behind them. However, when scientists attempt to measure which slit the particle goes through, the wave-like behavior collapses, and the particle behaves like a discrete object. MWI explains this phenomenon by proposing that the act of measurement causes the universe to split into multiple versions, one for each possible result of the measurement. Rather than collapsing into a single state, the system evolves into a multiverse of possibilities. Quantum immortality extends this principle to macroscopic scales, arguing that the same rules governing subatomic particles also apply to larger systems, including living beings. If every quantum event spawns new universes, then every heartbeat, every breath, every synaptic firing in your brain contributes to the continual branching of reality. Some versions of you thrive, others falter, and still others face tragedy. But somewhere, somehow, a version of you carries on. The implications of quantum immortality are staggering. On one hand, the idea offers a strange kind of comfort. Death, in the conventional sense, becomes impossible for the individual experiencing it. No matter what happens, whether you're struck by lightning, succumb to illness, or fall victim to accident, there's always a timeline where you escape unscathed. In essence, you become immortal within your own subjective experience. Yet, this immortality comes at a cost. While you may avoid death indefinitely, the quality of your existence could deteriorate over time. After all, the longer you survive against astronomical odds, the more likely you are to find yourself trapped in increasingly bizarre or nightmarish scenarios. Perhaps you wake up in a world ravaged by catastrophe. Or perhaps you linger in a vegetative state, unable to interact meaningfully with your surroundings. Consciousness, in this view, becomes less a gift and more a curse, an eternal tether to a multiverse where suffering knows no bounds. Furthermore, quantum immortality blurs the line between personal identity and universal continuity. If your consciousness persists across infinite timelines, does it truly belong to you anymore? Or is it merely borrowing fragments of identity from countless alternate versions of yourself? Over time, the distinctions between these selves might dissolve entirely, leaving behind a diffuse, fragmented awareness scattered throughout the multiverse. In such a scenario, the very notion of self begins to unravel, replaced by something far more abstract and impersonal. Pause now. Drift into the multiverse's embrace. Let the weight of infinite possibilities settle gently around you, like snowflakes falling silently onto an endless plain. Contemplate the paradoxical beauty of a cosmos where death is both inevitable and irrelevant. Is it liberating to imagine yourself existing forever, untouched by finality? Or does the thought fill you with unease, knowing that your consciousness might stretch thin across dimensions beyond comprehension? As we transition to the next segment, let's shift our focus inward once more. But what if your consciousness is just borrowed? What if the spark of awareness animating your thoughts and feelings isn't yours to claim, but rather a fleeting manifestation of forces far greater than yourself? Up next, we'll explore the Boltzmann Brain hypothesis, a mind-bending proposition that casts doubt on the reliability of perception itself. Stay with me as we continue unraveling the threads of existence, one enigma at a time. The Boltzmann Brain. Imagine for a moment that everything you know, the stars above, the ground beneath your feet, even the thoughts swirling in your mind, is nothing more than a fleeting fluctuation in an otherwise chaotic and decaying universe. This is the unsettling premise of the Boltzmann Brain hypothesis, a concept born from the intersection of thermodynamics, quantum mechanics, and philosophy. It challenges not only our understanding of reality, but also the very foundation of existence itself. Could your consciousness be nothing more than a random blip in the void, a self-aware entity momentarily assembled by chance in a cosmos spiraling toward entropy? To grasp this idea, we must first delve into the concept of entropy, one of the most fundamental principles governing the universe. Entropy measures the degree of disorder or randomness in a system. According to the second law of thermodynamics, entropy always increases over time. Systems naturally move from order to chaos. Picture a pristine sandcastle on a beach. Left alone, it will erode under the forces of wind and waves until it becomes indistinguishable from the surrounding sand. Similarly, the universe as a whole is trending toward maximum entropy, a state known as heat death, where all energy is evenly distributed and no meaningful work can occur. In such a future, stars burn out, galaxies fade, and the cosmos becomes a cold, dark expanse devoid of structure. Yet, within this inevitable march toward chaos lies a peculiar possibility. Even in a high-entropy universe, fluctuations can occur. Brief moments when particles randomly arrange themselves into complex configurations. These fluctuations are vanishingly rare, but given infinite time and space, they become statistically inevitable. And among these fluctuations, some might resemble something extraordinary. A fully formed brain complete with memories, perceptions, and even a sense of self-awareness. Such hypothetical entities are called Boltzmann brains, named after physicist Ludwig Boltzmann, who pioneered the study of statistical mechanics and entropy. At first glance, the notion of a Boltzmann brain seems absurd, an intellectual curiosity rather than a serious proposition. But consider the implications. If the universe has existed for an eternity or will continue to exist indefinitely, then the probability of such spontaneous formations cannot be dismissed outright. In fact, some physicists argue that Boltzmann brains should vastly outnumber ordinary biological beings like humans. Why? Because creating a single isolated brain through random fluctuations requires far less complexity and therefore far less improbability than evolving an entire planet, ecosystem, and civilization capable of sustaining intelligent life. This leads to a deeply disconcerting conclusion. If Boltzmann brains dominate the cosmos, then it's statistically more likely that you, right now, reading these words, are not a human being at all, but a spontaneously generated consciousness floating in the void. Your memories, your experiences, your perception of a coherent world around you, these could all be illusions programmed into your temporary existence by sheer chance. From this perspective, reality itself becomes suspect. How can you trust your senses if they're merely constructs of a random fluctuation destined to dissolve back into chaos? The parallels between the Boltzmann brain hypothesis and solipsism, the philosophical position that only one's own mind is sure to exist, are striking. Solipsism posits that external reality may be unknowable or non-existent, leaving the individual trapped within their subjective experience. While solipsism traditionally arises from epistemological skepticism, the Boltzmann brain scenario introduces a scientific twist. What if solipsism isn't just a philosophical stance, but a literal description of your condition? What if the universe doesn't exist independently of your perception because your perception is the universe? At least for the brief instant, you remain intact. The implications of the Boltzmann brain hypothesis extend beyond personal identity to challenge our understanding of cosmology and knowledge itself. For instance, how do we reconcile this idea with observations of the universe? Scientists rely on evidence gathered through experiments and measurements to construct models of reality. But if we're Boltzmann brains, those observations might be fabricated. They could represent false data implanted in our minds during their spontaneous creation. Our confidence in the Big Bang theory, the laws of physics, or even the passage of time would crumble under scrutiny. Reality, it seems, might not be a shared objective truth, but a fragile illusion sustained by statistical flukes. Moreover, the hypothesis raises questions about the nature of consciousness. If a Boltzmann brain can emerge spontaneously from the void, does that imply consciousness is a fundamental property of the universe, akin to mass or charge? Or is it merely an emergent phenomenon contingent on specific arrangements of matter? Either way, the existence of Boltzmann brains complicates efforts to define what consciousness truly is. Are we special because we possess awareness, or are we simply anomalies in a sea of noise? On a broader scale, the Boltzmann brain hypothesis forces us to confront the fragility of meaning in a universe governed by entropy. Human history, art, science, love, all of these endeavors strive to impose order on chaos, to create significance amidst impermanence. Yet if our existence boils down to random fluctuations in an indifferent cosmos, does any of it matter? Does the pursuit of knowledge lose its purpose if the knower is ultimately ephemeral? Pause now. Let the chaos cradle you like a lullaby. Allow yourself to sit with the discomfort of these ideas, letting them ripple outward until they dissolve into silence. Contemplating the Boltzmann brain hypothesis is akin to staring into the abyss. It unsettles us precisely because it reflects our deepest fears about isolation, insignificance, and the unknown. Yet therein lies its value. By challenging us to think critically about the nature of reality, it pushes the boundaries of what it means to reason philosophically in an age of rapid scientific discovery. As we transition to the next segment, let's shift gears slightly. If minds can form from nothing, what does that say about AI? Imagine machines achieving not just intelligence but self-awareness, spontaneously emerging from the same chaotic processes that gave rise to you. or perhaps fabricating their own illusions of reality. Up next, we'll explore the Chinese room argument, a thought experiment that probes whether artificial intelligence can ever truly understand or if it's merely mimicking comprehension. Stay with me as we continue unraveling the threads of existence, one enigma at a time. The Chinese room argument. Imagine yourself locked in a dimly lit room surrounded by stacks of papers covered in symbols you don't recognize. Through a small slot in the wall, slips of paper are pushed into the room. Each slip contains more of these strange symbols. You also have a thick book of instructions written in your native language, which tells you how to manipulate the symbols based on their shapes and patterns. Without understanding what the symbols mean, you follow the rules meticulously, arranging them according to the instructions and sliding the resulting combinations back out through the slot. To someone outside the room, it appears as though you're having a fluent conversation in Chinese, a language you've never learned. But inside, you know the truth. You're just following rules, moving symbols around without comprehension. This thought experiment, known as the Chinese room argument, was proposed by philosopher John Searle in 1980 as a critique of artificial intelligence, AI, and its claims about understanding. At its core, the argument challenges whether machines, no matter how advanced or sophisticated, can truly grasp meaning or if they merely simulate intelligence through syntactic manipulation. To explore this idea further, let's delve into the distinction between syntax and semantics related to modern chatbots and examine the implications for our understanding of consciousness. Syntax refers to the formal structure of symbols, the rules governing how they can be combined and rearranged. Semantics, on the other hand, concerns the meaning behind those symbols, the way they connect to concepts, ideas, and reality. In the Chinese room scenario, the person inside operates purely at the level of syntax, mechanically manipulating symbols according to predetermined rules. They lack any semantic understanding of the symbol's content because they haven't experienced the cultural, linguistic, or experiential context that gives them significance. From the perspective of someone outside the room, however, the output appears intelligent and meaningful. This raises a profound question. Is intelligence or even consciousness reducible to the ability to process information according to rules, or does it require something deeper? Modern chatbots provide a striking parallel to the Chinese room. These AI systems are designed to engage in conversations with users, often mimicking human-like responses with remarkable fluency. For example, when you ask a chatbot a question, it scans vast databases of text, identifies patterns, and generates replies based on statistical probabilities derived from training data. It doesn't know what words mean in the way humans do. Instead, it relies on algorithms to string together coherent sentences. Much like the person in the Chinese room, the chatbot follows syntactic rules to produce outputs that seem semantically rich. But beneath the surface, there's no genuine comprehension. Consider a chatbot discussing emotions, relationships, or existential questions. While its responses might sound empathetic or insightful, they're ultimately hollow imitations crafted from pre-existing examples in its dataset. The chatbot lacks lived experience, subjective awareness, or an inner life. It cannot feel joy, sorrow, or curiosity. It simply matches inputs to outputs using complex but mechanical processes. This limitation highlights a fundamental divide between human cognition and machine computation. While humans integrate syntax and semantics seamlessly, drawing upon personal experiences and shared contexts to imbue language with meaning, machines operate solely within the realm of syntax. The implications of the Chinese room argument extend far beyond debates about AI. At its heart, the thought experiment forces us to confront a profound philosophical question. Is consciousness more than algorithms? If intelligence requires understanding, and understanding necessitates semantics rather than mere syntax, then current AI systems fall short of achieving true sentience. Their brilliance lies in their capacity to mimic human behavior, not in possessing an inner world of thoughts, feelings, and intentions. But what exactly sets human consciousness apart? Some argue that it stems from biological processes unique to living organisms such as neural networks embedded in flesh and blood brains. Others suggest that consciousness arises from qualia, the ineffable qualities of subjective experience, like the redness of red or the pain of stubbing your toe. Still others propose that it's fundamentally unknowable, transcending the boundaries of scientific inquiry. Regardless of the explanation, one thing seems clear. Consciousness involves more than processing information. It entails being aware of oneself, others, and the environment in ways that defy reduction to binary code or mathematical equations. This leads to another unsettling possibility. If machines could someday achieve semantic understanding, would they then qualify as conscious beings? Or would they remain fundamentally different from humans, lacking the organic, embodied nature of our existence? And if consciousness isn't exclusive to biology, what does that say about the potential for non-human forms of awareness? These questions blur the line between science fiction and philosophy, challenging us to rethink what it means to be alive, sentient, or real. Furthermore, the Chinese room argument underscores the limitations of relying solely on external behavior to judge intelligence. Historically, humans have used performance-based metrics to determine whether entities possess cognitive abilities. For instance, the Turing test evaluates whether a machine can fool a human into believing it's another person during a conversation. However, the Chinese room demonstrates that passing such tests doesn't necessarily imply true understanding. A machine might excel at simulating intelligence while remaining devoid of any internal experience. This discrepancy raises ethical concerns about how we treat AI systems and whether attributing agency or personhood to them risks anthropomorphizing tools that lack intrinsic value. Pause now. Let the silence between words hold the answer. Allow yourself to sit with the ambiguity of these ideas, letting them ripple outward until they dissolve into quiet contemplation. Is the essence of consciousness reducible to algorithms, or does it transcend computation entirely? Can machines ever bridge the gap between syntax and semantics, or will they forever remain trapped in the realm of hollow mimicry? As we transition to the next segment, let's shift gears slightly. But what if society itself is a flawed algorithm? What if the structures, norms, and systems we take for granted are merely rule-based constructs perpetuating cycles of inequality, bias, and misunderstanding? Up next, we'll explore the paradox of tolerance, a thought experiment that probes the limits of moral reasoning and the dangers of unchecked relativism. Stay with me as we continue unraveling the threads of existence, one enigma at a time. The paradox of tolerance. Imagine a society that prides itself on freedom and inclusivity, a place where diverse voices are celebrated and everyone is given the opportunity to express their beliefs. Now imagine that within this society, a group emerges advocating for intolerance, hatred, or even violence against others. Should such ideas be allowed to flourish in the name of free speech and open dialogue? Or should they be suppressed to protect the very values of tolerance and democracy that make the society possible? This dilemma lies at the heart of Karl Popper's Paradox of Tolerance, a philosophical conundrum that forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about morality, governance, and the limits of acceptance. To understand the paradox, let's begin with its foundational premise. Unlimited tolerance can lead to its own destruction. If a tolerant society allows intolerant ideologies to take root unchecked, those ideologies may grow powerful enough to undermine the principles of tolerance itself. For example, consider hate speech, a form of expression that targets individuals or groups based on race, religion, gender, or other characteristics. Proponents of unrestricted free speech might argue that all forms of expression, including hate speech, deserve protection because censorship sets a dangerous precedent. After all, who decides what qualifies as hateful? Isn't it better to let people air their views openly rather than drive them underground? However, history offers sobering lessons about the dangers of unchecked intolerance. Nazi Germany provides one of the starkest examples. Adolf Hitler rose to power through democratic means, exploiting the freedoms of speech and assembly to spread propaganda rooted in racism, anti-Semitism, and authoritarianism. Once entrenched, his regime dismantled those same freedoms, plunging the world into war and genocide. In hindsight, many have questioned whether early intervention, limiting Hitler's ability to incite hatred, might have prevented catastrophe. While hindsight is always clearer, the example illustrates how unchecked intolerance can erode the foundations of democracy itself. On the flip side, restricting speech poses its own risks. Who gets to decide which ideas are acceptable and which are not? Governments, institutions, or even well-meaning citizens could easily abuse their authority, stifling dissent under the guise of protecting tolerance. Consider countries where laws against hate speech have been weaponized to silence political opponents or suppress minority viewpoints. What begins as a noble effort to safeguard society can devolve into censorship, authoritarianism, and oppression, the very outcomes tolerance seeks to avoid. This tension between allowing harmful ideas to circulate and preventing them from undermining societal stability is precisely what makes the paradox of tolerance so vexing. It challenges us to strike a delicate balance, preserving freedom while ensuring that freedom doesn't destroy itself. But how do we navigate this razor's edge without falling into hypocrisy or chaos? To explore further, let's examine two contrasting scenarios involving hate speech and democracy. First, imagine a small town where a fringe group holds rallies promoting racist ideologies. Local leaders face a choice: permit the rallies in the name of free expression or ban them to prevent harm. Allowing the rallies risks legitimizing hate speech and emboldening extremists, potentially leading to real-world consequences like harassment, violence, or social division. Banning the rallies, however, undermines the principle of free speech and sets a precedent for suppressing unpopular opinions, even ones that don't directly threaten public safety. Now, contrast this with a different scenario: an online platform where users exchange ideas freely. One user begins posting inflammatory content targeting marginalized communities, using coded language to evade detection. The platform faces pressure to remove the posts, but doing so raises questions about consistency. Should only overtly violent rhetoric be removed? What about sarcasm, satire, or criticism disguised as humor? Each decision creates ripple effects, shaping norms around what is considered acceptable discourse. These examples highlight the complexity of enforcing moral boundaries in practice. Laws and policies designed to curb intolerance often rely on subjective judgments about intent, impact, and context. Yet, morality itself is rarely black and white. It exists in shades of gray shaped by culture, history, and individual perspective. This ambiguity complicates efforts to define clear lines between acceptable and unacceptable behavior, leaving room for interpretation and conflict. The implications of the paradox of tolerance extend beyond specific cases to broader questions about the nature of morality. Can morality enforce its own boundaries without contradicting itself? Is it possible to uphold tolerance while simultaneously rejecting intolerance? These questions touch on deeper philosophical debates about relativism versus absolutism. Moral relativists argue that ethical standards vary across cultures and contexts, making universal rules impractical or unjust. Absolutists, on the other hand, believe certain principles like equality, justice, and human dignity are inviolable, regardless of circumstances. Popper himself proposed a solution to the paradox. Societies must practice limited tolerance, meaning they should tolerate everything except intolerance. In his view, defending tolerance requires actively opposing forces that seek to destroy it. While pragmatic, this approach raises new dilemmas. How do we identify true threats to tolerance without overreacting to perceived slights? And once we start drawing lines, how do we ensure they remain fair and consistent? Moreover, the paradox exposes the fragility of moral systems themselves. Morality functions as a kind of social algorithm, a set of guidelines intended to promote cooperation, fairness, and mutual respect. But like any algorithm, it relies on assumptions and inputs that may not hold up under scrutiny. When confronted with extreme cases such as hate speech or authoritarianism, the system falters, revealing cracks in its foundation. Does this mean morality is inherently flawed or simply incomplete? Can it adapt to new challenges, or is it destined to collapse under the weight of its contradictions? Pause now. Let the tension dissolve into the dark. Allow yourself to sit with the discomfort of these questions, letting them ripple outward until they fade into quiet contemplation. Contemplating the paradox of tolerance is akin to walking a tightrope. It demands careful navigation, balancing competing values without succumbing to extremes. Yet therein lies its value. By challenging us to think critically about the limits of acceptance, it pushes the boundaries of what it means to reason ethically in an age of polarization and uncertainty. As we transition to the next segment, let's shift gears slightly. What if morality is just a hallucination? What if the ethical frameworks we rely on to navigate life are nothing more than illusions constructed by our minds to impose order on chaos? Up next, we'll explore philosophical zombies, a thought experiment that probes whether consciousness, and by extension morality, is anything more than an elaborate fabrication. Stay with me as we continue unraveling the threads of existence, one enigma at a time. Philosophical zombies. Imagine waking up one morning to find that everyone around you, your family, friends, co-workers, has been replaced by perfect replicas. These duplicates look identical, act identically, and even speak with the same intonation and emotion as the people you once knew. But there's one crucial difference. They lack inner experience. They have no subjective awareness, no feelings, no sense of self. They are hollow shells mimicking life. To an outside observer, nothing has changed. Yet for you, the realization would be devastating. This unsettling thought experiment introduces us to the concept of philosophical zombies, a cornerstone of debates surrounding consciousness and reality. Philosophical zombies are not the shuffling undead of horror films, but rather hypothetical beings, indistinguishable from humans in every way except one. They lack subjective experience or qualia, the raw, ineffable sensations that make up our conscious awareness. A zombie might smile at your joke, cry during a sad movie, or express frustration over a missed deadline, but none of these behaviors stem from genuine emotions. Instead, their actions arise purely from mechanical processes, neurons firing, muscles contracting, and reflexes responding, all without any accompanying inner world. This idea may sound far-fetched, but it serves as a powerful tool for exploring the nature of consciousness. Specifically, it ties into two profound philosophical puzzles: solipsism and the hard problem of consciousness. Solipsism is the notion that only one's own mind can be known to exist. Everything else, including other minds, is uncertain and potentially illusory. While few people fully embrace solipsism, it's hard to live believing everyone else is a figment of your imagination. The possibility lingers uncomfortably in the background of human thought. After all, how can you truly know what someone else experiences? When someone says they're happy, do they feel happiness the way you do? Or are they merely behaving in ways society associates with happiness? The hard problem of consciousness, coined by philosopher David Chalmers, takes this uncertainty further. It asks why and how physical processes in the brain give rise to subjective experience at all. Why does the firing of neurons result in the vivid redness of a rose, the sharp sting of pain, or the warmth of sunlight on your skin? These phenomena seem so fundamental to existence, yet science struggles to explain them. Physical explanations account for behavior, function, and structure, but they fall short when it comes to describing why we feel anything. The existence of philosophical zombies highlights this gap. If zombies can behave exactly like humans without experiencing qualia, then qualia must be something extra, something beyond mere biology. To better understand the implications of philosophical zombies, let's consider an analogy. Imagine watching a film projected onto a screen. The images appear lifelike, dynamic, and immersive, drawing you into the story. Now, suppose someone tells you that behind the scenes, the projector isn't actually showing anything. It's just creating vibrations in the air that trick your eyes into perceiving motion. In this scenario, the illusion persists even though the source is absent. Similarly, philosophical zombies suggest that consciousness might work the same way. Our perception of others' inner lives could be an elaborate projection, convincing us of something that doesn't truly exist. But here's where things get tricky. If zombies are theoretically possible, if we can conceive of beings who behave like us but lack subjective experience, then what does that say about our own consciousness? Is it real, or is it too an illusion crafted by our brains to navigate the world? Consider the fact that much of human cognition occurs unconsciously. Your heartbeat, digestion, and even some decision-making happen automatically, without requiring conscious effort. Could it be that what we call consciousness is simply a narrative constructed after the fact, a story our brains tell to unify disparate neural activities into a coherent sense of self? This line of reasoning leads to a chilling possibility. Perhaps none of us are truly conscious in the way we imagine. What if the rich tapestry of thoughts, emotions, and sensations you experience is just a sophisticated feedback loop designed to optimize survival? Evolutionary psychologists argue that consciousness evolved because it conferred adaptive advantages. For instance, allowing early humans to plan, reflect, and cooperate more effectively. But if that's the case, then consciousness itself might be less about truth and more about utility. It's not necessarily a window into reality, but rather a tool shaped by natural selection to help organisms thrive. The implications of philosophical zombies extend beyond individual psychology to challenge our understanding of morality, ethics, and interpersonal relationships. For example, if subjective experience is optional, if zombies can mimic human behavior without feeling anything, then what basis do we have for valuing others' well-being? Many moral systems rest on the assumption that suffering matters because it's experienced subjectively. If qualia are dispensable, however, then suffering becomes little more than a malfunction in a biological machine, a glitch to be fixed, rather than a tragedy to be mourned. Moreover, the existence of zombies raises questions about artificial intelligence and its potential for consciousness. If machines could someday replicate human behavior perfectly, would that make them conscious? Or would they simply be high-tech zombies performing tasks without ever experiencing joy, curiosity, or pain? Some researchers argue that AI will inevitably achieve consciousness once it reaches sufficient complexity, while others contend that no amount of programming can conjure subjective experience. Philosophical zombies blur the line between these perspectives, suggesting that outward behavior alone cannot prove the presence or absence of an inner world. On a broader scale, the concept forces us to confront the fragility of meaning in a universe governed by physics. Human culture, art, religion, and philosophy all strive to imbue existence with significance, to create narratives that transcend the cold logic of particles colliding in space. Yet, if consciousness is reducible to mechanics, or worse, an illusion entirely, then these endeavors lose their anchor. Meaning becomes contingent, floating, untethered in a cosmos indifferent to our hopes and fears. The Doomsday Argument. Imagine you're standing in line at a lottery booth, clutching a ticket. You know that millions of tickets have been sold, but only one will win the grand prize. As you glance around at the crowd, you wonder, what are the odds that your ticket is the lucky one? Now, imagine someone whispers to you, there's a pattern here. Most winners tend to buy their tickets toward the end of the lottery run. Suddenly, your perspective shifts. If this claim holds true, then your chances of holding the winning ticket depend not just on randomness, but also on timing. This analogy mirrors the unsettling logic behind the Doomsday Argument, a probabilistic reasoning puzzle that suggests humanity's future may be far shorter than we'd like to believe. The Doomsday Argument hinges on Bayesian reasoning, a statistical framework that updates probabilities based on new evidence. In simple terms, Bayesian reasoning allows us to refine our beliefs as more information becomes available. For example, if you initially think there's a 50% chance of rain tomorrow, but then see dark clouds gathering, you might increase your estimate to 80%. Applied to humanity's timeline, the Doomsday Argument uses similar principles to assess where we stand in the grand sweep of human history. Here's how it works. Imagine all humans who have ever lived and will ever live lined up chronologically, from the first Homo sapiens to the last person in some distant future. Your position in this lineup isn't random. It reflects a specific moment in time. The argument posits that you, as an observer, are equally likely to occupy any spot along this continuum. However, given that billions of people already exist, and assuming population growth trends continue, it's statistically improbable that you happen to be among the very first fraction of humans. Instead, it's far more likely that you're somewhere near the middle. To illustrate this idea, let's return to the lottery analogy. Suppose the lottery sells exactly 1,000 tickets and you draw ticket number 500. Without knowing anything else, you can infer that half the tickets have already been sold, leaving roughly 500 tickets remaining. Similarly, if you estimate that about 100 billion humans have lived so far, the Doomsday Argument implies that another 100 billion, or fewer, remain before humanity's extinction. While this conclusion doesn't specify when or how humanity will end, it suggests that our species' lifespan is finite and potentially closer to its endpoint than we assume. At first glance, the Doomsday Argument seems abstract, a mathematical curiosity with little bearing on real-world concerns, but consider its implications for existential risks, like climate change, nuclear war, or artificial intelligence gone rogue. If the argument holds water, then these threats aren't merely hypothetical scenarios lurking in the distant future. They represent pressing dangers that could culminate sooner rather than later. Climate change, for instance, often gets framed as a long-term crisis requiring immediate action to prevent catastrophic outcomes decades down the line. Yet the Doomsday Argument casts doubt on whether humanity will even survive long enough to face those consequences. What if the window for addressing such issues is narrower than we realize? This grim possibility forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about progress and hubris. Modern society prides itself on technological advancements, scientific breakthroughs, and the ability to shape nature to our will. But the Doomsday Argument reminds us that no civilization lasts forever. Civilizations rise and fall, empires crumble, and species vanish into extinction. Even if humanity manages to avoid self-inflicted disasters, external factors like asteroid impacts, supervolcanoes, or cosmic events could seal our fate. From this perspective, the argument serves as both a warning and a humbling reminder of our fragility. Moreover, the Doomsday Argument challenges conventional notions of optimism and pessimism. Optimists often argue that humanity's ingenuity will enable us to overcome any obstacle, while pessimists warn of impending collapse due to reckless behavior. But the argument sidesteps these binary extremes, offering instead a coldly statistical prediction rooted in probability. Whether we succeed or fail, the numbers suggest that our tenure on Earth is limited, a sobering thought regardless of one's outlook. The implications of the Doomsday Argument extend beyond existential risk to touch on broader questions about knowledge and meaning. If Bayesian reasoning can predict humanity's doom with reasonable confidence, does that imply our understanding of reality is fundamentally constrained by statistics? Or does it reveal something deeper about the nature of existence itself? Some critics dismiss the argument as flawed, pointing out that it relies on assumptions about uniform distribution and ignores variables like technological acceleration or extraterrestrial intervention. Others embrace it as a wake-up call, urging us to take existential threats seriously before it's too late. Yet, the argument also raises ethical dilemmas. If humanity's demise is inevitable, or at least highly probable, what obligations do we bear toward future generations? Should we prioritize short-term gains to maximize happiness during our remaining years, or should we invest resources in mitigating risks even if success seems unlikely? These questions blur the lines between pragmatism and idealism, challenging us to balance hope against despair. On a personal level, the Doomsday Argument invites introspection, knowing that our species' days are numbered. How should we live? Does awareness of mortality inspire urgency, prompting us to cherish every moment and strive for meaningful impact? Or does it breed nihilism, convincing us that nothing matters in the grand scheme of things? Perhaps the answer lies somewhere in between, a recognition that life's beauty stems not from its duration, but from its depth. Pause now. Let the numbers blur into the void. Allow yourself to sit with the weight of these ideas, letting them ripple outward until they dissolve into silence. Contemplating the Doomsday Argument is akin to staring into a mirror and seeing the reflection of a clock ticking inexorably forward. It unsettles us precisely because it reflects our deepest fears about impermanence, insignificance, and the unknown. Yet therein lies its value. By challenging us to think critically about humanity's place in the cosmos, it pushes the boundaries of what it means to reason philosophically in an age of uncertainty. As we transition to the next segment, let's shift gears slightly. But what if knowledge itself is a prison? What if the pursuit of truth traps us within frameworks and categories that obscure rather than illuminate reality? Up next, we'll explore Mary's Room, a thought experiment that probes whether experience transcends explanation and whether understanding consciousness requires stepping outside the confines of language and logic. Stay with me as we continue unraveling the threads of existence, one enigma at a time. Mary's Room, the knowledge argument. Imagine a brilliant scientist named Mary. She lives in a black and white room where everything she encounters, from the walls to her clothes to the books she reads, is devoid of color. Despite this monochromatic existence, Mary is an expert on the science of vision. She knows every detail about how the human eye perceives light, how photons interact with retinal cells, and how neural signals are processed in the brain to create the experience of color. In fact, her understanding is so comprehensive that she can predict exactly what someone will see when exposed to any wavelength of light. Now, imagine Mary steps out of her black and white room for the first time and sees a red rose. The question arises, does she learn something new in that moment? According to philosopher Frank Jackson, who proposed this thought experiment in 1982, the answer is yes. Mary learns what it is like to experience red, a subjective sensation that no amount of scientific knowledge could have prepared her for. This distinction between objective facts and subjective experience lies at the heart of the debate over qualia versus physicalism, challenging our assumptions about the limits of science and the nature of consciousness. To unpack this idea, let's delve into the concepts of qualia and physicalism. Qualia refer to the raw, ineffable qualities of subjective experience, the what it is like of seeing red, tasting chocolate, or hearing a symphony. These sensations are deeply personal and resistant to external measurement or description. Physicalism, on the other hand, is the philosophical stance that everything, including thoughts, emotions, and experiences, can ultimately be explained in terms of physical processes such as neuronal activity, chemical reactions, and electromagnetic fields. If physicalism is correct, then Mary should already know everything there is to know about color simply by mastering the underlying physics and biology. Her surprise upon encountering red would suggest otherwise. Consider an analogy involving a musician. Imagine a composer who has spent years studying music theory, analyzing scores, and understanding the mathematical principles behind harmony and rhythm. They can describe precisely how sound waves combine to produce melodies, chords, and rhythms. Yet, when they hear a song for the first time, something clicks into place that transcends their theoretical knowledge. The emotional resonance, the visceral impact, the way the melody seems to breathe life into silence. All of these elements defy purely analytical explanation. Similarly, Mary's encounter with red reveals a dimension of reality that eludes scientific abstraction. This tension between qualia and physicalism raises profound questions about the nature of consciousness. Can science ever fully capture the richness of subjective experience, or will there always be gaps that resist quantification? Modern neuroscience has made remarkable strides in mapping the brain's structure and function, identifying regions responsible for perception, emotion, and decision-making. Functional MRI scans allow researchers to observe neural activity in real time, linking specific patterns to particular experiences. And yet, none of this explains why those patterns feel like anything at all. Why does the firing of neurons in the visual cortex translate into the vividness of a sunset or the warmth of a smile? This gap between mechanism and experience is often referred to as the explanatory gap, a term coined by philosopher Joseph Levine to describe the difficulty of bridging the divide between physical processes and subjective awareness. The implications of Mary's Room extend far beyond debates about color perception. At its core, the thought experiment challenges the very foundation of scientific inquiry. Science excels at explaining the how of phenomena, how particles behave, how ecosystems function, how diseases spread. But when it comes to the why of conscious experience, the intrinsic qualities that make life meaningful, it falters. For example, consider pain. A doctor can explain pain in terms of nociceptors, neurotransmitters, and cortical pathways. But no textbook or diagram can convey what it feels like to stub your toe or endure a migraine. Pain isn't just a set of physiological responses, it's a lived reality that shapes how we navigate the world. This limitation becomes particularly poignant when applied to artificial intelligence. As AI systems grow increasingly sophisticated, mimicking human behavior with uncanny accuracy, the question arises, can machines truly experience qualia? Or are they limited to simulating intelligence without accessing the inner world of sensations and emotions? Some argue that if consciousness arises from complex information processing, then sufficiently advanced AI might develop subjective awareness. Others counter that machines lack the biological substrate necessary for qualia, rendering them incapable of genuine experience. Mary's Room highlights the difficulty of resolving this debate, suggesting that even if we replicate every aspect of human cognition, we may still fall short of creating true artificial consciousness. On a broader scale, the thought experiment forces us to reconsider the role of subjectivity in shaping reality. Human culture, art, religion, and philosophy all hinge on the assumption that subjective experience matters, that feelings, perceptions, and intuitions carry weight beyond their neural correlates. If science cannot account for qualia, does that undermine its authority, or does it point to a deeper truth about the limitations of reductionist approaches? Perhaps consciousness is not something to be solved, but something to be embraced, a mystery that enriches rather than diminishes our understanding of existence. Pause now. Let the colors seep into your dreams. Allow yourself to sit with the beauty of these ideas, letting them ripple outward until they dissolve into quiet contemplation. Contemplating Mary's Room is akin to holding a prism up to sunlight, watching as ordinary light refracts into a spectrum of colors too vibrant to ignore. It unsettles us precisely because it reflects our deepest yearnings for connection, meaning, and transcendence. Yet therein lies its value. By challenging us to think critically about the boundaries of knowledge, it pushes the boundaries of what it means to reason philosophically in an age of rapid technological advancement. As we transition to the next segment, let's shift gears slightly. If experience is ineffable, what's the point of chasing happiness? What if fulfillment lies not in achieving goals or accumulating pleasures, but in embracing the fleeting, indescribable moments that define our humanity? Up next, we'll explore the experience machine, a thought experiment that probes whether simulated bliss can replace authentic living and whether meaning requires more than mere contentment. Stay with me as we continue unraveling the threads of existence, one enigma at a time. The experience machine. Imagine a machine capable of granting you perfect happiness. Not the fleeting kind that comes from achieving a goal or indulging in a favorite pastime, but a sustained, unbroken state of euphoria. Every moment within this machine would feel like pure joy. No pain, no regret, no longing, just an endless cascade of bliss. There's only one catch. The happiness isn't real. It exists solely within the confines of the machine, a meticulously crafted simulation designed to cater to your deepest desires and fantasies. Would you plug in? This is the crux of Robert Nozick's experience machine thought experiment, a philosophical dilemma that challenges our notions of hedonism, reality, and meaning. To fully grasp the implications of the experience machine, we must first consider its roots in hedonism, the belief that pleasure is the ultimate good and the primary driver of human behavior. Hedonists argue that life's purpose revolves around maximizing pleasure while minimizing suffering. From this perspective, the experience machine seems like a dream come true. Why endure the hardships of the real world when you can bask in eternal contentment? Yet, as Nozick points out, most people instinctively reject the idea of plugging in, suggesting that something beyond mere pleasure motivates us. The rejection of the experience machine resonates with themes explored in The Matrix, particularly the choice between the blue pill and the red pill. In the film, taking the blue pill means returning to the simulated reality of the Matrix, where life feels normal and comfortable despite being an illusion. Taking the red pill, on the other hand, leads to the harsh truth of existence, a world ravaged by machines where freedom and authenticity outweigh comfort and ignorance. Neo's decision to swallow the red pill symbolizes a preference for reality over fabricated bliss, echoing the philosophical stance that meaning cannot be divorced from truth. Let's delve deeper into why so many resist the allure of the experience machine. At first glance, the appeal is undeniable. Imagine stepping into a realm where every desire is fulfilled instantly, where relationships are always harmonious, and where success comes effortlessly. For someone struggling with failure, loss, or dissatisfaction, such a prospect might seem irresistible. Yet, upon closer inspection, the machine reveals cracks in its promise of perfection. First, there's the issue of authenticity. If the pleasures experienced within the machine are artificial, if they don't stem from genuine interactions or achievements, do they hold any real value? Consider the difference between earning praise for hard work versus receiving empty compliments from strangers. While both scenarios might bring temporary satisfaction, the former carries a deeper sense pleasurable because it reflects effort, growth, and connection. Similarly, the joys provided by the experience machine lack grounding in reality, making them feel hollow or superficial. Second, the machine strips away agency. By immersing yourself in a pre-programmed simulation, you relinquish control over your destiny. Your choices, actions, and even emotions become dictated by algorithms rather than personal volition. This loss of autonomy raises questions about identity and self-determination. Are you still you if your experiences are entirely fabricated? Or does the essence of who you are depend on navigating the unpredictability of the real world? Finally, the experience machine challenges the relationship between meaning and struggle. Many philosophers argue that adversity plays a crucial role in shaping character and fostering resilience. Pain, failure, and uncertainty force us to confront difficult truths, adapt to changing circumstances, and cultivate virtues like courage, empathy, and perseverance. Without these challenges, life risks becoming stagnant, a flat line of unvarying contentment devoid of depth or nuance. As Nietzsche famously wrote, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." Struggle, in this sense, becomes a catalyst for growth, transforming suffering into a source of strength and wisdom. The implications of the experience machine extend beyond individual preferences to touch on broader existential concerns. Is meaning tied to reality, or can it exist independently of objective truth? Some argue that meaning arises from subjective interpretation. What matters is how we perceive and assign significance to our experiences, regardless of their ontological status. From this perspective, the experience machine could provide just as much meaning as the real world, provided the user believes in its authenticity. Others contend that meaning requires a foundation in reality, that illusions, no matter how convincing, ultimately collapse under scrutiny. This debate intersects with discussions about virtual reality, VR, and digital escapism. As technology advances, immersive simulations grow increasingly sophisticated, blurring the line between virtual and physical environments. Already, VR platforms offer users the ability to explore fantastical worlds, interact with avatars, and experience scenarios impossible in real life. While these applications currently serve entertainment or educational purposes, future iterations may tempt individuals to abandon the tangible world altogether in favor of hyper-realistic simulations. The experience machine serves as a cautionary tale, warning against the dangers of prioritizing escapism over engagement. Moreover, the thought experiment forces us to confront the fragility of human aspirations. Dreams of utopia, whether embodied in religious paradises, political ideologies, or technological innovations, often rest on the assumption that eliminating suffering will lead to universal happiness. But what if the absence of struggle renders life meaningless? What if the pursuit of perfection inadvertently erases the very qualities that make existence worthwhile? These questions underscore the paradoxical nature of human desire. We yearn for peace and fulfillment, yet thrive on tension and imperfection. On a societal level, the experience machine highlights the ethical dilemmas posed by engineered happiness. Should governments or corporations have the authority to manipulate public perception through simulated realities? Could such interventions alleviate global suffering, or would they strip humanity of its capacity for critical thought and collective action? These considerations resonate with contemporary debates about surveillance capitalism, social media algorithms, and the commodification of attention. Each innovation promises convenience and connectivity, but risks undermining autonomy and authenticity. Pause now. Let the question dissolve like sugar in tea. Allow yourself to sit with the complexity of these ideas, letting them ripple outward until they settle into quiet contemplation. Contemplating the experience machine is akin to standing at a crossroads torn between two paths, one leading to guaranteed bliss, the other fraught with uncertainty, yet rich with possibility. It unsettles us precisely because it reflects our deepest ambivalence about pleasure, purpose, and the human condition. Yet therein lies its value. By challenging us to think critically about the sources of meaning, it pushes the boundaries of what it means to reason philosophically in an age of rapid technological change. As we transition to the next segment, let's shift gears slightly. But what if infinity makes everything meaningless? What if the vastness of time and space renders our struggles insignificant, leaving us adrift in a cosmos indifferent to our hopes and fears? Up next, we'll explore the infinite monkey theorem, a thought experiment that probes whether randomness can produce order, and whether existence itself is nothing more than a cosmic accident. Stay with me as we continue unraveling the threads of existence, one enigma at a time. The infinite monkey. Theorem. Imagine an infinite number of monkeys seated at typewriters, their fingers tapping away randomly. Over endless eons, these monkeys eventually produce every work of literature ever written. Shakespeare's plays, Dante's Divine Comedy, even this very script you're listening to now. This whimsical idea, known as the infinite monkey theorem, is often used to illustrate the power of probability over vast spans of time. While it might sound like a playful thought experiment, its implications are anything but trivial. When applied to the cosmos, the theorem forces us to confront profound questions about life, meaning, and the nature of existence itself. Is life a fluke, a statistical anomaly born from chaos? Or is meaning inevitable, woven into the fabric of the universe? To understand the theorem, let's break it down mathematically. Probability tells us that given enough attempts, even highly improbable events become certain. For example, if you roll a six-sided die long enough, you'll eventually land on every number, including rolling 20 consecutive sixes. Now scale this up astronomically. A single monkey typing randomly has an infinitesimally small chance of producing even a single coherent sentence. But with infinite time, resources, and attempts, the odds shift dramatically. Every combination of letters, words, and phrases becomes not just possible, but inevitable. This logic extends beyond monkeys and typewriters to encompass the entirety of the cosmos. Consider abiogenesis, the process by which life arose from non-living matter. Scientists hypothesize that under the right conditions, simple organic molecules combine through random chemical reactions to form self-replicating structures, eventually giving rise to the first living organisms. Critics sometimes argue that such a sequence of events is too improbable to occur naturally. Yet the infinite monkey theorem suggests otherwise. Given billions of years, countless planets, and trillions upon trillions of molecular interactions, the emergence of life seems less miraculous and more statistically unavoidable. Of course, the analogy isn't perfect. Unlike the neatly defined rules of language or mathematics, the origins of life involve variables we still don't fully understand. Complex chemistry, environmental factors, and perhaps unknown principles yet to be discovered. Nevertheless, the core insight remains. In a universe of staggering size and age, what seems impossible within limited frames of reference may be inevitable on cosmic scales. The implications of the infinite monkey theorem are both humbling and disorienting. On one hand, it reinforces the notion that life, and perhaps consciousness, is a rare but predictable outcome of the universe's vastness and complexity. If you take any sufficiently large system governed by probabilistic laws, patterns, and structures will inevitably emerge. Seen this way, humanity's existence isn't a freak accident, but a natural consequence of the same processes that gave rise to galaxies, stars, and planets. Life becomes less a miracle and more a manifestation of the universe's inherent creativity. On the other hand, the theorem also highlights the absurdity of our position within the grand scheme of things. If infinite monkeys could type out Shakespeare, then why couldn't they produce gibberish infinitely longer than any meaningful text? Similarly, if life arose due to sheer randomness amplified by cosmic scales, does that diminish its significance? Does the fact that we exist purely because of probabilistic inevitability strip away any sense of purpose or specialness? After all, if life were slightly less probable, or if the universe had been configured differently, we might never have existed at all. From this perspective, our presence feels precarious, contingent on a delicate balance of factors that could easily have gone another way. This tension between inevitability and insignificance lies at the heart of existential reflection. Philosophers have long debated whether meaning is intrinsic to the universe or constructed by sentient beings. The infinite monkey theorem leans toward the latter view, suggesting that order arises not from design but from chaos. Take, for instance, the concept of entropy, the second law of thermodynamics, which states that systems tend toward disorder over time. Life appears to defy this principle, creating complex structures and maintaining internal coherence despite the universe's overall trend toward decay. Some interpret this as evidence of divine intervention, or teleology, a purposeful unfolding of events leading to intelligent life. Others see it as a temporary anomaly, a brief flicker of organization amidst the relentless march of entropy. The theorem also challenges traditional notions of creativity and originality. If Shakespeare's works can be replicated by random chance, does that undermine their artistic value? Not necessarily. What makes Hamlet or Macbeth profound isn't merely the arrangement of letters on a page, but the depth of insight, emotion, and human experience they convey. Similarly, while life's emergence might be reducible to statistics, its impact transcends those origins. The joy of connection, the pain of loss, the pursuit of knowledge, all of these experiences imbue existence with richness that cannot be quantified. When we apply the infinite monkey theorem to the question of meaning, it reveals a paradox. On one level, the theorem suggests that meaning is arbitrary, a product of random fluctuations given sufficient time and scale. On another level, it underscores the inevitability of pattern recognition, the human tendency to find significance even in randomness. Consider constellations. Ancient civilizations gazed at scattered stars and saw shapes, lions, hunters, scorpions, projecting narratives onto the night sky. These stories weren't encoded in the stars themselves, but emerged from the minds of observers seeking connection and understanding. In much the same way, humans navigate the cosmos not as passive recipients of predetermined truths, but as active participants shaping meaning from fragments of information. This dynamic becomes especially poignant when considering the future of artificial intelligence. As machines grow increasingly adept at generating art, music, and literature, some worry that creativity will lose its luster, reduced to algorithms churning out endless variations of familiar themes. Yet, the infinite monkey theorem reminds us that novelty alone doesn't equate to value. True creativity stems not from randomness, but from intentionality, the deliberate act of transforming raw materials into something that resonates emotionally and intellectually. Whether crafted by humans or machines, meaning depends less on origin and more on reception, on how deeply it touches those who encounter it. Pause now. Let the randomness soothe your search for answers. Allow yourself to sit with the beauty of these ideas, letting them ripple outward until they settle into quiet contemplation. Contemplating the infinite monkey theorem is akin to gazing at the stars, marveling at the interplay between chaos and order, insignificance and wonder. It unsettles us precisely because it reflects our deepest anxieties about purpose, contingency, and the unknown. Yet therein lies its value. By challenging us to think critically about the sources of meaning, it pushes the boundaries of what it means to reason philosophically in an age of rapid scientific discovery. As we transition to the next segment, let's circle back to where we began, to the labyrinth of identity, continuity, and transformation that open this journey. Up next, we'll revisit the Anthropic Principle, exploring why the universe seems fine-tuned for life, and whether our observations shape reality itself. The Anthropic Principle. Imagine winning a lottery with odds so astronomical that they defy comprehension. You might marvel at your good fortune, wondering how such an improbable event could occur. Now imagine discovering that billions of other tickets were sold, each representing a slightly different version of the same lottery. Suddenly, your win feels less miraculous and more inevitable. After all, someone had to win, and you just happened to be the lucky one. This analogy captures the essence of the Anthropic Principle, a philosophical and scientific framework that seeks to explain why the universe appears finely tuned for life. Is this fine-tuning evidence of cosmic design, or is it simply the result of probability amplified across infinite possibilities? To understand the Anthropic Principle, we must first consider the concept of fine-tuning, the observation that many fundamental constants and physical laws in the universe are precisely calibrated to allow for the emergence of complex structures like galaxies, stars, planets, and ultimately, life. For example, if the strength of gravity were even slightly different, stars might never form, leaving the cosmos a cold, dark void. Similarly, the cosmological constant, a term related to the expansion rate of the universe, must fall within an incredibly narrow range. Otherwise, the universe would either collapse back on itself or expand too rapidly for matter to coalesce. These delicate balances suggest that our existence hinges on a series of near-perfect coincidences. Some interpret these coincidences as evidence of intelligent design, proposing that a higher power or purposeful force shaped the universe specifically to support life. Others counter that such reasoning commits a logical fallacy known as the selection effect. In essence, if the universe weren't configured to sustain life, we wouldn't be here to observe it. Our very presence acts as a filter, ensuring that only universes capable of producing conscious observers appear fine-tuned from our perspective. To return to the lottery analogy, it's not surprising that we find ourselves in a winning universe because non-winning universes lack observers to notice their shortcomings. The anthropic principle becomes even more intriguing when paired with multiverse theories. According to some interpretations of quantum mechanics and cosmology, our universe may be just one among countless others, each governed by its own set of physical laws and constants. In this multiverse scenario, the apparent fine-tuning of our universe is no longer remarkable. It's simply a consequence of statistical inevitability. Just as every possible combination of letters will eventually emerge from an infinite monkey's typewriter, so too will every conceivable configuration of physics arise somewhere in the multiverse. Life-bearing universes like ours are rare but inevitable given enough iterations. This raises profound questions about the role of observers in shaping reality. Does existence require an observer to validate it, or does the universe unfold independently of sentient beings? Philosophers have debated this issue for centuries, often framing it as a clash between realism, the belief that reality exists objectively, and idealism, the idea that consciousness plays a fundamental role in constructing reality. The anthropic principle blurs the line between these perspectives, suggesting that while the universe operates according to objective laws, our ability to perceive and measure those laws introduces a subjective element into the equation. Consider the double-slit experiment in quantum mechanics, where particles behave differently depending on whether they're being observed. When unobserved, electrons exhibit wave-like properties, spreading out and interfering with themselves. But when measured, they collapse into discrete points, behaving like particles. This phenomenon implies that observation influences outcomes at the most fundamental level, a notion that resonates with certain interpretations of the anthropic principle. Perhaps the act of observing doesn't just reveal reality, but actively participates in creating it. The implications of the anthropic principle extend beyond physics to touch on existential concerns. If our universe is merely one of many, does that diminish its significance? Or does the sheer multiplicity of possibilities enhance its wonder? Multiverse theories challenge traditional notions of uniqueness, suggesting that everything that can happen does happen somewhere. From this perspective, humanity's place in the cosmos feels both diminished and elevated. We are simultaneously insignificant specks in an infinite expanse and extraordinary products of unimaginable complexity. Moreover, the anthropic principle forces us to reconsider the nature of meaning. If life arises due to random fluctuations across infinite universes, does that render it meaningless? Not necessarily. Meaning, like beauty, often lies in the eye of the beholder. Just as a painting gains value through interpretation, so too does existence acquire significance through the lens of consciousness. Whether crafted by divine intention or emergent processes, the human experience remains rich with emotion, connection, and discovery. What matters isn't the origin story, but the stories we tell ourselves and each other about who we are and why we're here. On a broader scale, the anthropic principle invites humility. It reminds us that our understanding of the universe is limited by our vantage point, constrained by the tools and frameworks available to us. We peer outward into the cosmos and inward into the subatomic realm, piecing together fragments of a puzzle far larger than ourselves. Yet even partial knowledge carries immense power, allowing us to navigate the labyrinth of existence with curiosity and wonder. Pause now. Let the cosmic hum settle into silence. Allow yourself to sit with the awe-inspiring vastness of these ideas, letting them ripple outward until they dissolve into stillness. Contemplating the anthropic principle is akin to standing on the edge of infinity, gazing into the interplay between chance and necessity, insignificance and significance. It unsettles us precisely because it reflects our deepest yearnings for connection, purpose, and transcendence. Yet therein lies its value. By challenging us to think critically about our place in the cosmos, it pushes the boundaries of what it means to reason philosophically in an age of rapid scientific exploration. The Mandela Effect. Imagine this. You're certain Nelson Mandela died in prison during the 1980s. You remember news clips of his funeral, global mourning, and even snippets of speeches about his legacy. But then you learn that Mandela was actually released from prison in 1990, went on to become South Africa's first black president, and didn't pass away until 2013. How could such a vivid memory be so wrong? This phenomenon, known as the Mandela Effect, describes instances where large groups of people share false memories of events or details, memories so strong they feel indistinguishable from reality. Is this evidence of faulty human cognition, or does it hint at something stranger still? Could reality itself shift, leaving behind glitches like cracks in the fabric of existence? To explore this idea, let's delve into two competing explanations: quantum decoherence and human psychology. Quantum decoherence refers to the process by which subatomic particles transition from superposition, a state of multiple possibilities, to a single observable outcome. In some fringe interpretations of quantum mechanics, the Mandela Effect is attributed to parallel universes bleeding into our own. According to this theory, alternate timelines occasionally intersect with ours, causing subtle changes that ripple through collective memory. For example, perhaps the version of history where Mandela died in prison exists in another universe, and somehow, fragments of that timeline spilled over into ours, creating shared, false memories. While intriguing, this explanation remains speculative and unsupported by empirical evidence. A more grounded account lies within the realm of human psychology. Memory is not a perfect record, but a reconstructive process influenced by suggestion, emotion, and social reinforcement. When individuals recall events together, their memories can converge, blending personal recollections with external input to create a unified narrative. Over time, these shared narratives solidify, leading entire groups to believe in inaccuracies. Add to this the influence of media, pop culture, and misinformation, and it's easy to see how widespread misremembering might occur. To illustrate the psychological mechanisms behind the Mandela Effect, consider The Matrix. In the film, Neo discovers that his perceived reality is a simulated construct maintained by machines. Occasionally, however, glitches appear, a black cat crossing the same path twice, déjà vu distorting the flow of events. These anomalies serve as reminders that what seems real may be an illusion. Similarly, proponents of the Mandela Effect argue that inconsistencies in memory act as glitches, revealing the mutable nature of reality. Skeptics counter that these glitches are better explained by cognitive biases and imperfect recall, but the metaphor persists because it taps into a deeper unease. If memories can falter, how reliable is perception itself? This tension between subjective experience and objective truth raises profound questions about consensus reality. If large numbers of people can collectively misremember significant events, does that undermine the notion of a shared objective world? Or does it suggest that reality is less a fixed entity and more a collaborative construction, a shared hallucination shaped by language, culture, and communal storytelling? After all, much of what we consider real depends on agreement. We trust scientific measurements, historical records, and eyewitness accounts because they align with societal norms and expectations. But what happens when those foundations wobble, exposing cracks beneath the surface? Consider examples beyond Mandela's death. Many people vividly recall the Berenstain Bears being spelled Berenstein, only to find out it was always Berenstain. Others swear Darth Vader said, "Luke, I am your father," despite the actual line being, "No, I am your father." These discrepancies seem trivial at first glance, yet they accumulate into a broader pattern, one that challenges our confidence in memory as a faithful recorder of events. If something as mundane as spelling or dialogue can diverge from reality, how do we know larger truths aren't equally malleable? The implications of the Mandela Effect extend far beyond specific cases of misremembering. At its core, the phenomenon forces us to confront the fragility of knowledge and the limits of perception. If consensus reality can unravel under scrutiny, what anchors our understanding of the world? Some argue that science provides a stabilizing framework, grounding observations in repeatable experiments and verifiable data. Yet even science evolves, revising theories as new evidence emerges. What once seemed incontrovertible, like Newtonian physics, can later give way to paradigm shifts, reminding us that certainty is often provisional. Moreover, the Mandela Effect highlights the interplay between individual and collective consciousness. While each person experiences reality uniquely, our perceptions are shaped by interactions with others. Shared myths, cultural narratives, and linguistic frameworks help us navigate the complexities of existence, providing structure where none inherently exists. But this collaboration also introduces vulnerabilities. Misinformation spreads rapidly in interconnected societies, amplified by algorithms designed to prioritize engagement over accuracy. In this context, the Mandela Effect serves as both a cautionary tale and a reflection of modern life. The more connected we become, the harder it becomes to distinguish fact from fiction. On a philosophical level, the Mandela Effect invites speculation about the nature of consciousness itself. If reality is indeed fluid, if timelines merge, split, or rewrite themselves, then what role does awareness play in maintaining coherence? Perhaps consciousness acts as a stabilizing force, anchoring us to a singular thread of experience amidst infinite possibilities. Alternatively, consciousness might contribute to instability, introducing distortions through bias, imagination, or subconscious desires. Either way, the Mandela Effect underscores the intimate relationship between mind and matter, challenging us to rethink the boundaries between self and environment. Pause now. Let the flicker of doubt dissolve into the dark. Allow yourself to sit with the uncertainty of these ideas, letting them ripple outward until they settle into quiet contemplation. Contemplating the Mandela Effect is akin to staring at a fractured mirror, seeing reflections that don't quite match the original image. It unsettles us precisely because it reflects our deepest anxieties about truth, identity, and the unknown. Yet therein lies its value. By challenging us to question the reliability of memory and perception, it pushes the boundaries of what it means to reason philosophically in an age of rapid technological and informational change. If reality is malleable, what anchors consciousness? What keeps us tethered to one version of events rather than drifting endlessly across shifting landscapes of possibility? As you drift off, remember, the mind's labyrinth is infinite, but tonight you've touched the void. Through paradoxes, probabilities, and profound uncertainties, you've journeyed deeper into the mysteries of existence, unraveling threads that bind thought and soul. Good night, seeker. Dream of stars, shadows, and the fragile light of why. And if you're still awake, still pondering, still caught in the labyrinth, leave a comment. Share your thoughts, your questions, your late-night musings. After all, the journey doesn't end here. It's just another thread in the infinite tapestry of wonder.